they're not ready to give up the dream of US. As he said, not everyone understand they are the frog in that water which is being boiled. And a lot of bachelors going in, they like that idea. Okay, you start, you struggle, you survive, then you thrive. Yeah. Whereas there's a lot of families who are putting all these things in risk. The way I think about it is you don't really sacrifice the current standard of living to achieve another one. That's when you have a family, that's very risky. Not a lot of people really have that amount of risk tolerance, but they're willing to take it just to say, okay, I'm in US. So now the way you explain things within US, it makes a lot of sense.
This is one man's opinion.
No, but it makes a lot of sense. We had Indians there living there, but not in California. Mostly they're all in Texas, like Dallas, Houston and all. And I got to talk to them over the last 3-4 months. They were like, if you locked in at the lowest interest rate, you're one of those few lucky guys. But other than that, most of them are paying high rent or high mortgage right now. If you put in variable, you're kind of, squeezed with the cost of living and your mortgage. Yeah. So that's being the reality of a lot of Indians who we think are successful because they have a high paying job, but then they are taxed, right? But yeah, compared to California and all, Texas is much better on that front. They're not, chopping you that big.
Yeah, the thing about America and a lot of places, it's and I'm very pro-America and pro-opportunity. The beautiful thing about America is it's a meritocracy, meaning if you're good at what you do, you will find your way up. It's like an honor system, right? But this whole idea of when I moved to California to pursue acting, you go back home and you have your friends that never left where they're from, and they're like, oh, you made it, you went to California, you're doing it. They don't know that I'm living in a garage that someone turned into a studio. I'm eating tuna every night just to say that I'm, at the time I didn't know I was going to pay to act versus get paid to act for the first 10 years. And so, the whole idea of pursuing the dream, it's beautiful, but no matter whether it's Hollywood or going there to become a stockbroker or whatever, there's going to be dues to be paid. It's not like you just get there and the opportunities are at your door. I'm sure it's no different in India or any other country where, there's probably going to be different ceilings and different floors to each of these industries. But, I was watching Charlie Rose. I don't know if you know who he is, but he used to be a famous interviewer in America. And he had a guy named Steve Martin. And he's a bona fide artist. I mean, he plays the banjo. He's got great artwork. He's does comedy, actor, but he's known to be very, very shy. And this guy was saying, okay, you're in this field where so much of becoming discovered is about being in the right circles, being around the right parties and stuff, so you can get discovered. And this guy, without blinking, he said, Charlie, if you get really good at something, one thing, they find you. And it struck a chord with me of if you focus on what you're doing, at what's right in front of you, the blessings come.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. That was one of the core matters which we were discussing before about focusing on one rather than just diversifying into an entrepreneurship era. But the base idea here is kind of clear. If you have that fire inside you, if you have that chip on your shoulder, where you're I'm going to go to any extent, I'll work myself as much as possible. You have opportunity in that land. Yeah. But just make sure these guys are coming in legal visas. They're not, taking their family into that kind of a mess where they are crossing through the Mexico or through the Canadian borders where, either there's been a lot of stories, the reality of people where they were buried under the snow. The police had to, pull them off. They were frozen bodies at that point. So just before they left India, they had a lot of dreams, but all of those were frozen, right? So if you are to go into that country to make something, to make it big, then most likely try the correct way, right? That's the real message.
Hey, I don't think you want to have to deal with the repercussions of, say you're there, you build a life, you're doing all the right things, but you came in illegally, and you're living with this weight that any moment someone could come and pull the rug out from underneath you, and in 10 hours you're on a plane going back. I used to be able to, I was raised on the border, but you see illegal aliens, Hispanic in nature, all over the country, right? And this might sound like a broad statement, but I've always been able to recognize someone here who's illegal and who's not. And when I said that to my dad, he said, what are you talking about? And I say I can tell by the aperture of their eyes because they're a little bit wider, because everywhere they're going, they're walking with the fear of I might get caught. And so if you're bringing your family and you're bringing yourself here under this worry, like what if you were to cheat on your taxes? Are you going to feel free and easy and like peaceful? Or are you always going to have this shadow of wondering, oh my gosh, am I going to get caught with interest on top of the penalties? So, it's not always the shortest line, but I think it always makes sense to keep it on the right side of the road as far as doing it legally. The squeeze isn't worth the juice to do it the illegal way, I believe.
Okay, so those who actually want to reach that spectrum of that country now have a basic idea of what you really think about those. Then I want to touch on the idea.
But let's just put it. Let's put it into your term. Is that an asymmetrical bet or not?
Nah, for me,
come in illegal versus illegal, is the squeeze is it a symmetrical bet or is it an asymmetrical? Is there more payoff, substantial payoff compared to the risk, or is the risk so much greater, or even equitable to the payoff? Like we're not going to do some kind of like 3L, 10L like kind of move if we're looking for 10% gain.
Yeah, that's the actual point. The trouble is these agents actually sell the dream that the risk which you're taking, it's very small, and the reward they in that country which is awaiting for you, it's so big. That's the agents selling the dream.
Why isn't the agent over there doing it then?
Yeah, but the trouble is...
that's the proof,
average,
right? Like, why isn't the agent, if there's so much opportunity and it's like that, why am I here taking a measly 3% off of you?
Yeah, that's the truth actually. And these people, when they end up there, just like you were explaining, the reality sets in very quickly. Like, oh shit, like I'm here with my family, I don't have a place to stay. Now I have to pay this much in rent on a hotel or a Airbnb. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Then you have to start working on survival jobs, right? So the reality sets in very quick. But till that point, till they reach that point, they really think like, okay, there's a lot of rewards, which is fabricated actually.
There is the potential. There's like some of the best stories in history are about the people who didn't. Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like he would sneak off the army base from Austria and like literally get on a train and go to other countries to compete as a bodybuilder because of his love of the game and also the potential of winning. And he faced the possibility of a court-martial, right?
Yeah.
This is serious, but he did it.
Yeah.
He did it, and not only that, that he went on and like risked it all, going to all these countries, to the U.S. and like living out the dream. So the reward's there. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
But are you Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, that's the trouble. Like most of them, as I see nowadays, are like snowflake generation. Mm-hmm. The current heat, they can't take it. So if they really want to go through this, the amount of pain which they have to perceive, it's very big. If you really do not have the persistence to go through that, it's hard. And nowadays, at least in my eyes, it seems like not a lot of people have that inside them. When they start nearing that heat, they melt. They melt right away. So if you are going on the right path with the correct visas and you have the skill set and qualification, that's okay, but also an attitude to contribute into that ecosystem. Because I see a lot of people with these sets, but still when they reach there, they fail to assimilate into that culture. So you first have to, in my eyes, you first have to think, what are you going to compromise to reach there? Mm-hmm. Because there's always a compromise when you're shifting the entire family from one part of the world to the other, right? So there are few who come back because the cultural environment doesn't actually fit them. But there are few who sets in there, right? Now, on that front, before we conclude, I would like to touch on the base question. Like, as an American, when you are looking at America, what's the next 5, 10, 15 years like? Like, this is to give the normal Indians an idea about if you're dreaming about that country, dream about these things.
I try to approach life, and this might not be what your audience wants to hear, but like the quality of my so-called future is dependent on how conscious I am in this moment. This is the only moment that we have, right? And like if I'm out here worrying about the future, the very nature of life is uncertainty, and the nature of my mind is to try to create certainty. So who's going to win that battle 100% of the time is the uncertainty of life. This is on an individual basis. But as far as where the U.S. is going, I quit drinking 18 and a half years ago, and my life has only gotten better. but it took going to the bottom to decide to make a change. Is America at the bottom, or is it going to go a little bit further before there's some kind of, whether you call it a spiritual revolution or some kind of awakening or some kind of renaissance, call it what you will. I believe that it's happening to some degree. I think that's happening on a global level, but unfortunately people move at the rate of pain. They don't make any changes in their life until they're in pain. I think countries are the same way, where a lot of times there's going to maybe have to be some kind of pain to make that shift. We'll see, you know. I think the collective conscious is real. I think there's a lot of fear in the air. Like they say, if another pandemic were to come, I think like 68% of Americans have less than $400 in their savings account.
That's a hard reality, actually.
So if there's that many people that are living every day, waking up thinking like, how am I going to make this work? That collective consciousness of fear is real, and it's going to inform all the different arenas. But the good thing is life is always
connected,
ebbing and flowing, and it's always moving in the opposite direction. And so, like you said earlier, like, are you one of these people? Can you remain solvent longer than the market can remain volatile?
Yeah, and that situation fits in well in almost every situation of life, right?
Yeah.
So when we say, like, buy low, sell high, in markets it makes a lot of sense. So the way you explain the economy, it does make sense now for me, actually. Like, is it at the top? Are you going to bet on a country which is at its peak in last 10, 20, 30, 40 years? Or are you going to wait for that economy to correct a little bit down before it takes off the next leg?
We see like the world reserve currency would last like 80 years.
The average is 105. Now we're getting closer.
Right.
I agree.
So, you say all the time, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Oh, it does.
Why is it going to be any different? I think we're seeing this whole new sector with the digital currencies and tokenization coming in, which could possibly save the fate of the US dollar. But if I think it's like 70% of all dollars have been created since COVID, how do you avoid the inflation? How do you avoid this showing up, trickling out somewhere, right?
Yeah, I think it's the entire system. Like when you look at India, 65% of the currency was made up in last 5 years, like 4.5 years. Yeah. And that's one of the primary reasons for inflation. We understand that. But the argument which I would make on that front is, like, think about it, like almost every nation have a lot of debt. Like last time China didn't have that much debt. They had a lot of surplus which they were pouring into the market back in GFC 2008, 2009, 2010, which kind of stabilized the market a little bit. This time China has sky high debt. They're pouring money in. It's QE going, quantitative easing going on right now in China.
Yeah.
And it started in India, it started in the US. So they're all moving on to that front, right? So the way you explained, I understand, like, okay, what I'm thinking in that side of the aisle is not wrong. Like, there will be opportunities, but it may not be the right time.
I tell you what, I think, just sitting here listening, talking to you, like, we don't know what's going on with all these tariffs, how it's going to end up. It's all chess, and maybe it's just scare tactics, maybe it's going to be real, but we're already seeing large companies committing to building factories in America. There's going to be, we worry about AI coming in and taking all these jobs, but like, if anything was shown to us in COVID was like, oh, the US is just a consumer market. We're not producing anything. But
they're changing it.
Everyone that we're consuming from is dependent on us as much as we're dependent on them. But if China became a bigger consumer market versus producing stuff, if we start building cars again and building chips and these things that we haven't been doing, medicine, whatever, building the infrastructure that can supply that, there'll be a labor force that's required. And some of those sectors, it's going to require above average intelligences as far as the people who will be working in those factories. So that's the cool thing about life. Like, would you go to a movie if you knew the ending?
No.
This is the thing about, the fate of America. Who knows? But like, the secret, I think, is to enjoy the ride, count your blessings. What is my measurement of wealth, our family, our kids, especially you and I having these young kids? Life is going by like that. You can get into this mindset of accumulating, thinking that somehow if I get enough, some happiness is somewhere over there in America or over that hill or wherever the dream is. But if the practicality, the truth is that happiness is only available now, why am I making my goal somewhere over there? And so this idea of thinking that the happiness is in America or happiness is when I finally accomplish this thing. I think there's a lesson to be learned in any of these arenas. I know this is more of a financial, political topic that we're talking about, but if you boil it down to, this is all a spiritual world. Mm-hmm. And if I come at it from that angle, I think I'm going to make wiser choices based more out of truth versus fear.
So one of the primary takeaways in here is go with the flow, which is one, to the long-term potential of US remains the same. Like when Trump was actually building the America back with the manufacturing being pulled back into the country, I believe there's a lot of opportunities, especially over the next 5-10 years. And the way you explained it by showing the tariffs and how the manufacturing industry is coming back.
Starting to shift, yeah.
The different type of skills, everyone is going to be needed there. But you have to make sure, you're not the guy with the wrong skills at the right place, right? So for all the Indians who are watching this, thinking about the future in US, I would say watch all of this, write down the key points, because some of these are directly coming from the base idea of US as a land of the free. And that too from someone who has grown up and built his entire career in that country. So I really thank Branton for being in this episode with us.
Cheers,
and taking the time to, detail it for my audience here about, what's your dream and what structure will that dream have when you're landing into the US. Because as of now, it's just a red carpet and roses, which the agents here sell. But you actually showed there's a lot of swamps as well, where if you step in, it's done, right? So once again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, brother. It's been great being here. It's been great talking with you.
So if you watch till the end, I would actually argue you guys to say, smash the like button for us. Yeah? Now pop that finger for me, brother.